committee because a lot of residents were there was a real big backlash in regards to the amount and quantity of development happening and taking place, and some of the statistics coming through in regards to where that development is focused and the volume of development that's focused is quite sad. We need to be looking at ways we can encourage developers to build, yes, more environmentally friendly ESD higher standards buildings and encourage ways that they don't try to squeeze every square inch out of a block and build medium density that families will be proud to live in. So I'm looking forward to receiving some further advice from council officers in terms of their investigation and then looking at what we can pursue.
Thank you, Councillor. Any councillor wish to speak against? Then I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We move on now to item DED 6418, Place Action Plans, Year 1 Report. Do I have a mover for this item? Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tapanos. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor
I'll
Carly
just
Hannon?
speak briefly again to thank the work of council officers, and also councillors have put a lot into this as well. It's probably another one that fits into that thing of being stuff that we all agree on, so less debate in the chamber, but lots of hard work behind the scenes. And one of the other things that we've spoken about today around community engagement, I think we should note the work that's gone into the Fleming Park master plan and to finally be progressing with that. And then also some of that work that we're doing with Wheatsheaf Hub, and we've all got our fingers crossed. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tapanos?
No, just briefly to just say that there's some big dollars here and some big projects that have been achieved. So I'll encourage everyone to actually have a read of the reports and make sure to have a look at where their rates have been spent, because I think here you would find some of the best value for money that we've spent in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Councillor. Any councillor wish to speak against? And I'm going to put this to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report is DCS 4818, Governance Report, October 2018, Cyclical Report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dorney. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davidson. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
Oh, sorry, can I move a slightly amended?
Oh, right, yes, you can.
Yep.
So we'll just see if that's, read it, and then we'll see if the second is still comfortable in seconding.
So I was granted a leave of absence on the 22nd of August through till, doesn't matter, but for this report, it says that I was an apology at the planning meeting on the 20th of August, but I actually think it was the 22nd of August that meeting occurred.
Right.
Because I only took a leave of,
Okay, so you're amending, you're asking for an amendment.
On
you said we're a
page
councillor record.
278 on the councillor record.
Okay.
I'm happy with that.
Yep, so that's fine to the seconder. So, I think we're clear on that.
Yeah, and
so
the councillor briefing as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So just reflective of my leave of absence. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, councillor. Would you like to speak on the report at all?
No, I won't.
No.
Thanks.
And councillor Davidson? No.
Do we need to put the man?
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so we need to appoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for point 4?
Yep. So councillor Abood.
Councillor Abood. Right. Okay. Thank you. So point 4 needs to have Councillor Abood placed in it.
Sorry, I just need some clarification
On the dates. Okay. All right.
Can we ask for the briefing on the Monday? So just
The
just through the mayor. So there's a planning meeting and planning briefing. I think we thought it was a planning briefing. Are you referring to the?
I'm referring to a plan. It says planning meeting 20th of August, which is actually the briefing, but that needs to be corrected.
Now, were you also on leave for the planning meeting on the 22nd of August? Sorry? Right, okay, so it's only that one that needs to be corrected. Okay, okay, it's comfortable, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, I think we're clear on that. Now we're going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. All right. DCS 4918, Financial Management Report for the period ending the 31st of August 2018, Cyclical Report. You have a mover? Councillor Tapanos? And the seconder, Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Tapanos?
Just very briefly, the financial reports for the 30th of August. I think you would find that in the reports we are tracking quite well, and there is a significant forecast, budget forecast, which is better than what we had in plan. Now, I know that some of that might be due to some timing and invoices, but nonetheless, that is significant money, $7.2 million. Better than forecast. So it just goes to show that we are tracking quite well as a council, and I must say a lot of those were external contractors, so it's great to see that we are saving money in that area. So we are travelling really well, and that means we can afford to actually do more and service the community more. And upon reflection of my time on council, I certainly noticed that the budget keeps getting bigger and bigger, and the capital works in particular keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I'm really pleased about that, because you're seeing real change in the community, and that means major projects like Oak Park can actually be funded, like Wheatchef Road can be funded, Brunswick Baths, and quite ambitious plans into the future for community hubs and swimming pools in Faulkner and other areas. So all of that is your rates at work, and but that doesn't happen unless there is good financial management. And what you find in this report is that we are doing that. We're in a very good financial situation, and we are continuing to plan and have the resources to be able to maintain our assets well into the future.
Thank you, Councillor. Would you like to speak to it? Any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Next report we have to consider is DCS 5018, Contract 711T, Provision of Cloud Infrastructure Services. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dorney. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Abood. Would you just like to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
No.
Councillor Abood?
I don't think so, thank you.
Okay. Any speakers?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Farnley.
Well, it's a $2.5 million contract.
Yes,
I think
it is.
Just deserves a couple of comments. It's 2.6 million. Sorry, a little over that. Over 10 years, it's a significant contract for council, and it's a big contract. But hopefully, as technology moves, we are able to shift with the times. I did have some concerns in regards to the tenure of the contract. They've been addressed. We are locked in for 3 years. It can shift after that period of time. I was concerned with the costs of the contract and the quality of the respondents, and I'm in communication with the CFO and CEO in regards to addressing some of those concerns and making sure that we have a really high quality supply list and competitive tendering process in future to make sure that we are able to save as much ratepayer money as possible for the community.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors wish to speak? Being no further discussion, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can I move on block the next two contracts, DCI 40 and DCI 41?
If you have a seconder to it, I'm happy to take both on block. Councillor Tapanos is moving both those reports, so it's DCI 14018 and DCI 14118, and Councillor Yildiz is seconding both of them. Is that correct, Councillor Yildiz?
Yep.
Right, would you like to speak to either? We're just moving them on block?
No, I'll take them as read.
Okay.
But it's great to see that some major road reconstruction projects are starting to occur.
Fine. Okay. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Yildiz? Okay. Yes.
Can I speak to it? Just
You
so
can.
the others haven't spoken.
Yep.
I just would like to really highlight these contracts are in line with our new procurement policy at council. What is actually written in the report is that these roads are going to be constructed with a large amount of recycled content. So this is council's new procurement policy really kicking in. What we're seeing here is around 1,130 cubic metres of recycled concrete being used, and the equivalent of 725 truck tyres. So what that means is we've paid slightly more for the contract, which I think it says around 16% in there, but that has secured 50 to 60% recycled content in this road. And I really think that credit should be given to our officers, to our procurement teams, because this is the sort of stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. We have a waste crisis in Australia, even though our state government may have forgotten that. But what we're doing at a council level is we're actually putting our hand up and we're saying we will buy recycled product. And so I think it's really great to see that come through in our procurement.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? So, councillors, just to be clear, we're voting on both of those as a block. And we're going to put those to the vote now. All those in favour? Against, declare them carried. Okay, we move on to notices of motion. Councillors, I ask that you start by stating your motion. If it's the motion that's in the agenda, you can just say as listed. And the first one, notice of motion 4518, Bees in Moreland, and it's a motion from Councillor Abood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a very slight amendment at point 2B.
Yes.
So after the word series to add including educating, sorry.
Yeah, go on, keep going.
Including educating people about the impacts of chemicals such as glyphosate on bee colony health.
Okay. So do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Dorney, and you may speak to it.
Thank you. So while I acknowledge that there are other pollinators, including hoverflies and birds, bees basically are responsible for ensuring that we have food to eat. We know that we've witnessed right across the world significant collapse of bee colonies, and there are practices in train now such as carting bees up to the almond orchards to make sure that the almonds are getting pollinated. And the nature of this notice of motion is just to start getting some information about what we can do as a council to start protecting bee colonies. It was kicked off by a notice of motion that was put by Moonee Valley Council, which went to the National General Assembly of the Australian Local Governance Association, and I'm pretty sure it was successful.
It was.
Which was a similar piece of work. And the objective is to make sure that colonies of bees are not being exterminated anywhere. As much as we can, and that we're doing absolutely everything that we possibly can to make sure that we're protecting bees, including working with partners like the Merri-Creek Management Committee, who've had a lot of success with their blue-banded bee program, which has been creating what they're calling bee hotels along the Merri-Creek, and they've recorded some great success with those trials, but obviously similar work would happen with Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek. I think that council would do well to recognise the work of local apiarists and support them wherever we can. And it's not uncommon for people to have beehives, and that might be us as well, on their properties that they literally don't even have to worry about, except although I did get stung by a bee the other day, we have bees, all we do is watch them pollinate our plants and somebody cares for them who's their bee daddy. And it's a similar kind of scenario where if we are finding hives of bees, on council land that need to be removed, we would make sure that those hives are protected and put somewhere where they can continue to be healthy colonies and pollinate plants and make honey.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconder is Councillor Dorney. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Dorney?
Yeah, I just rise to commend Councillor Abood on this notice of motion. Bees pollinate 1/3 of our food that we actually eat every day, if you're eating a healthy diet of fruit and vegetables. It aligns really well with our food systems strategy, and it's a real waste to think that bee colonies are being exterminated in our city when we have opportunity to rehouse them. That rehousing, I feel, creates also potential training, education and employment opportunities potentially through production and actually looking after the hives. So, really, really supportive of a report coming back and figuring out what we can do in this space.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion on this? Yes, Councillor Tapanos?
I have a slight amendment if it's acceptable, and that's on dot point 1. So after the words council land, put a comma and if required and leave it at that. So to delete with a view to establishing rooftop hives on appropriate council buildings and just leave it at council land if required.
Okay. Is that acceptable to the mover and the
So
second?
it will read, investigate options for sustainable relocation of European beehive, honeybee swarms found
That's
on
not
council land,
No, I
comma,
don't think
if required.
Okay, it's not accepted.
Sorry.
So, yeah,
Happy to second.
you're happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, I do think this is a great policy, and I do commend the Deputy Mayor for putting it into the chamber. I do note that a lot of our residents do have beehives, and I do note also that there might be some on council land as well, particularly in our creek corridors. Now, if they are not a burden, if they are not a problem, if residents have not complained, I don't see why they should be relocated. But in the circumstances that they are required to be relocated, I really don't think that council facilities, council buildings and rooftops such as this is the appropriate place to actually put beehives. I think serious consideration needs to be given towards occupational health and safety, particularly for people who suffer from allergies, who may be accessing those buildings. So I do think that although it might be seen as a possible solution, is really not a required solution at all, because we have plenty of council facilities, open space, where we can put beehives, and to actually spend time and effort developing policies and considering an option of putting beehives on council buildings, where we have huge traffic of people, council buildings which have customer service facilities, which have children facilities, which have maternal child health facilities. I really don't think that is ideal. I really don't think that is required. And I think what we should be doing is encouraging the relocation of these beehives, if required, to other open space areas. So my amendment's a simple one. Don't spend time and effort trying to put beehives on this building, on maternal child health buildings, on kindergarten buildings. Put them in open space where it's more appropriate.
Thank you. Do you have with a second I'd like to speak to it? No? Okay. I'd like to speak against from the chair. Okay. Only because I do have a bit of knowledge on this, because the Mayor of Moonee Valley, who was in Alga, Mayor John Sypek, has had for the last 2 years bees on the council buildings at Moonee Valley, and in fact the Governor-General disagrees with you, Councillor Tapanos, because he, at the time at Canberra, he was summoned to the Governor-General's residence to receive an award for his innovation in doing so by General Cosgrove and Lady Cosgrove. And in fact, I must say I was reasonably surprised at the way in which he was received at Government House, but it was the Governor-General was most upbeat about the whole program and actually, as I say, rewarded him with it. And they've been in operation, he tells me, for around 2 years now, and they haven't had any issues regarding health, etc., of the civic building in Moonee Ponds. And so, I tend to disagree with you. That's just me from the chair. Anyone else want to speak in favour of Councillor Tapanos's amendment?
I'll speak against.
I'm going to leave it because I've spoken against. So we're going to put Councillor Tapanos's amendment to the vote first. All those in favour of Councillor Tapanos's amendment? Against? No, so we go back to the substantive motion. Anyone who would like to, we've had a speaker against in the substantive motion. Anyone who would like to speak in favour of Councillor Aboud's motion? Okay, I'm going to put that to the vote. You can, yes, you did have a speaker against, so you may close the debate.
No, I support the amendment.
No, that's true. Okay, that is, yep, sorry, you are correct. Apologies. All right, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Yeah, am I right? Yes. All right, the next notice of motion is from myself and a statue to John Pascoe Faulkner, and I would like to move what's been circulated at this point, and seconded by Councillor Davidson, so I have a seconder, and I'd like to speak to it. Just to put it in context, the City of Melbourne has turned its back on sculptors of two pioneers, John Batman and John Pascoe Faulkner. Both sculptures previously held prominent places in the city. In my view, the historical revision of our colonial history that has occurred recently has been overdue. We have learnt concerning aspects about John Batman's life. Sometimes, however, I think we are at risk of disowning our own colonial past altogether, as if we should forget it and ignore those from that period that are worthy of recognition. I ask councillors to reflect on judging all people by the actions of their contemporaries. I, for one, hope that in 100 years' time, I won't be judged by the actions of Eddie Obeid simply because I was an elected representative at the same time that he was.
Is there a second up?
I
Yes, it
do.
was me.
Councillor Davidson,
Yes.
are you paying attention? Good. No. We need to look a little closer. John Pascoe Faulkner was a successful businessman and a progressive politician. He established one of the colony's first hotels and our first newspaper. He went on to develop a large agricultural property bordered by the Moonee Ponds Creek and what is now Gaffney Street, Northumberland Road and Boundary Road, as well as much of Faulkner, hence the names of the suburbs Pascoe Vale and Faulkner. He was a foundation member of the Legislative Council and he continued to serve all Victorians with integrity until his death in 1869. He was extremely progressive of his time, ahead of his time in many ways. He championed the rights of single mothers and deserted mothers. He rallied against a political system that protected the rights of small numbers of squatters, leaving the bulk of the population with no hope of ever owning land. He hated religious sectarianism and was a genuine idealist. He and his wife adopted children, and his grandson, John Springhall, was a Coburg councillor in the 1920s, and hence Springhall Parade in Pascoe Vale South is named after him. Faulkner died in his home in Smith Street, Collingwood, a grand old man of Victorian politics, with over 15,000 people attending his funeral. I don't want John Pascoe Faulkner statue and the recognition of his accomplishments, my view, is to be hidden away and forgotten. I'd like to see the fine sculptor given pride of place and prominence that I think John Pascoe Faulkner rightly deserves, holding pride of place, possibly fronting Moreland Civic Centre, and so I move this motion tonight to begin that process. Would the seconder like to speak to it all?
Yes. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Kavanagh for bringing this motion to this notice of motion to council, and for the work that was published in The Age newspaper that Councillor Kavanagh wrote. Just in relation to John Pascoe Faulkner, I think, as Councillor Kavanagh said, he was a great forward thinker, and I'm proud to acknowledge his part of our history here in Moreland and make a home for this piece of artwork. If anyone's seen the artwork, it's of John Pascoe Faulkner bending down. He's very close to the land, and I think that really symbolises his connection to the land and to the people, and that's something that I want to acknowledge and be proud of, and hopefully own here in Moreland at one point.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers or... yeah, Councillor Bolton? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against this because now I don't swear that I'm an authority on John Pascoe Faulkner, but I, in a day and age when we've got very few even recognitions of the areas of genocide, where genocide happened in Australia, and very little recognition of Aboriginal freedom fighters, I don't feel that we should be, we've already got a suburb named Faulkner, so I'm not proposing that we change the name of the suburb Faulkner, but I don't think we need to have some extra celebration of John Pascoe Faulkner in Moreland. I feel that the historical balance sheets haven't been properly righted, and I think really in Australia we still privilege the colonial figures who are involved in massive injustice. Well, injustice is probably an inadequate word towards Aboriginal people, and John Pascoe Faulkner was part of that along with Batman. So I wouldn't be at all comfortable in supporting this proposal. I can recognise the points that the Mayor has made about maybe some progressive attitudes in other elements of his life, including opposition to sectarianism, and I think that's important. But I don't see us needing to bring this statue to Moreland.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Yildiz.
Can I just say, I mean, this is a long time coming, and I congratulate you on doing this because, John, because John Pascoe he's been instrumental in what he did for this municipality. But more importantly, there was an article in the paper only a couple of weeks ago, or was it this week, about John Pascoe's house.
Yeah.
Being up for sale or something or other, but read a little bit about him in there as well. But if you look at the history of where he's come from and what he's done, very proud man. I think this has been a long time coming. We should have probably done this decades ago, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Riley?
Thank you. I just want to move an amendment, and I've circulated it to councillors and officers fairly late in the day, but can I read it?
Yes, I think it's probably a good idea.
So I wanted to add an additional point, and I think the motion may actually sort of explain where I'm coming from, so it should be fairly self-evident that the report include recommendations. Point 3, that the report include recommendations for a potential community engagement and public participation process to involve our diverse communities, including our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander citizens, which will A, consider the value of public monuments that support the telling of broader history and herstory of Moreland's geographical area, including its place in state and national storytelling, semicolon. B, inform future steps for Council's potential role in telling and retelling Moreland's many stories, such as our her stories and his stories, preceding European arrival and post-arrival, semicolon. And C, which considers the potential for resourcing such a role in a future Moreland City MCC plan I've got there, which is our Moreland plan, ranging from a minor effort through to a major effort or role. So the last line is just to sort of talk about doing some sort of minimal work in that area, but something that might be much more involving. So I wanted to open that possibility.
As a mover, I'm happy with that. I'd just like a little bit of a time frame myself.
Oh, yes, sorry. The other amendment I wanted to add, thank you, is that that a report, if we could just add a D, that a report come back to council by, say, February 2019.
Okay,
Sorry,
that's actually acceptable.
It's the same, it's all the same report. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually acceptable to me. Is it acceptable to the seconder?
Can I clarify in relation to point 3? Is that contingent upon? So is it separate from, or is it contingent with the John Pascoe Fork statue? Is that?
Yes, it's all to come together in the same report as a recommendation. That's the intention, so that we consider it all at the same time. So if it's not viable, if it comes back that it's not viable, then we probably don't need to do point 3. But it's only if it is viable that we would.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, given the mover
that's all right. That's
is
all right with
acceptable,
me.
I also
Now, just check with
agree.
the CEO. Just wants to say something about the time frame.
Just wanted to make a suggestion on the date. The timeframe itself isn't a problem, but it would mean that consultation happens during sort of Christmas break,
Okay.
which I think we want to try and
You'd
avoid
be
if we
more
can.
comfortable at March.
Be better March. April would be better, but March would be
Okay.
better
Can we
than February.
have
that's
March?
for
Is
sure.
that what we're? All right. That's acceptable to me.
Can we get the view of the Wurundjeri Council?
That's all included in that, pretty much, including our Aboriginal Torres Strait
Can I just
Islander.
clarify something?
Yes.
Received the report by March 2019 that the report includes recommendations for a potential community engagement. So the engagement doesn't happen before we receive the report, because the report determines what the engagement might look like.
All right.
Maybe some.
So
Should you do-
it could be in February is my point, because that's an internal thing. And then it talks about.
Yeah. So just through the mayor, it's worth being really clear about that. I have to admit I interpreted the report as bringing it all back. Now, if it's not, then that's quite
I'd probably
different.
like to bring it all back at that point.
Okay, so then it's really for
Yeah.
it's for the amendment in terms of what
You
time
okay
frame.
with that?
If we're going to do a much more in-depth process, then I think it should come back in March or April.
Fine, fine. Happy with that then.
And you need to, through the chair, you need to remove the words recommendations for and just includes community engagement. Is that not right?
Is that okay with you?
Yes.
So just a suggestion again through the mayor, includes a summary yet. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sally.
All right, that's acceptable to the mover and seconder. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Riley?
Oh, look, I just briefly, this has caused some cause for reflection for me about this because for the kind of arguments that Councillor Bolton has put up. But in the light of history being many, many things, there's an infinitesimal interpretations of history or herstory. And I think that what we need to be doing is looking at the positive aspects of our history and the less positive aspects of our history. And I hope that this might just start to look at that process. The attempt is to try and look at that process in a bit more of educating ourselves and our community and using the new engagement and participation strategy in a way of doing that as well. So obviously this is an initial step. I think that it may lead to much more ongoing commitment from the council, but I think it'd be good to get some feedback from the community about where we want to go with this.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
Yeah. So this is a classic scenario for me about how not everybody feels the same way about these type of statues of grumpy old men. And for me personally, it led me to have a heated exchange and then quite a bit of hugging later on the next day over the issue. And a long story, but it can be divisive, you know?
Yeah.
People don't necessarily agree on this stuff straight away. And so I think that the idea of having a consultation about people telling this story is a really good one. And one of my initial responses was to the John Pascoe Faulkner is to bring them both in and compare them to each other, because these people had a huge impact on the first Australians who were in this place when they arrived here. And by chance or design, one of them got to do a dirty deal and the other one arrived later. Maybe that door was kicked open and he took advantage of the situation. We don't really know because we weren't there. But I think that it is quite important to, first of all, test the waters with the community about whether there is some value about this story being told. And potentially it is an opportunity for us to be able to really reflect and tap into some of the story that hasn't been told at all about who was here when those two men arrived. And so I'm hoping that there's a bit of vision about that, because I think that, you know, this council is, and many other councils and other councils right across the country are really trying to find ways to support the first Australians that were here long before we were and basically were invaded. And I think that if we've found a way, and yes, we would have to consult with the Wurundjeri people of this area, you know, to start to begin to tell what actually happened and take responsibility and own, rather than pretending it isn't there and erasing it, some of the heinous crimes that were committed on these people that were here, then potentially it's a great opportunity. So I'm interested to see where this falls and what people say in terms of responding to, you know, being asked about whether we should pursue this, and if there is any interest about, you know, telling the whole story rather than pretending it wasn't a thing.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Tapanos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, don't we have enough things called Faulkner? I mean, haven't we commemorated these people enough? I know, you know, founding fathers, and I think Faulkner probably founded Melbourne, or probably has that distinction along with Batman, but you know, and I know someone mentioned before about his estate here as well. You know, that estate was called Pascoe Vale. So he's commemorated with two suburbs, Faulkner and Pascoe Vale, and numerous other public facilities, open space, hospitals, etc. So I think if you have a look at the scale of commemoration, we've commemorated them enough. But I'll tell you who we haven't commemorated. The rest of the history of Australia, the rest of the stories, and whether that is the stories of the Dreamtime and our Indigenous Australians that we've heard some people speak around this chamber that go back 50,000 years. We haven't commemorated those stories. We haven't commemorated those people enough. Other people we haven't commemorated, people that came after the first settlers, migrant communities, the people who worked in the gold mines, Eureka Stockade, the post-war migration, which really built this suburb, built this city, the industrial past, the migrant families that came here with very little money and, you know, worked hard and built up the local economy and worked in the factories. What we don't have is statues to men and women from migrant backgrounds that came later. What we don't have is statues to Indigenous leaders. What we don't have is statues to scientists, educators, people who really made a difference. But what we do have is an abundance of commemorations and statues from this one period of time in Australia's history, which, may I say, has a lot of serious question marks over it. So I say no. I do recognise history is history and we need to acknowledge and reflect upon all of it. But I say also enough. Let's have a statue about a prominent migrant. Let's have a statue around an Indigenous leader. Happy to support those. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Farley.
I rise to speak against the notice of motion being put forward for a number of reasons. Firstly, it probably should be two separate notices of motions. One is addressing the issue of whether we bring the John Pascoe Faulkner statue to Moreland, and a separate notice of motion should probably consider whether we do more work in recognising Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and what work we can do to maybe potentially put a monument in their name forward. So this is a bit of policy on the run, which routinely gets criticised by some councillors, and it's quite poorly written. I'm not in favour of elements of this. I think looking at whether we actually resource a council officer to look at history of this stuff is that an appropriate use of council resources and time. The other point I'll make is it's quite disappointing that only a few months ago when Councillor Tapanos put forward a motion to put forward investigate whether we should put a mural of one of our former Prime Ministers that represented this area. And the comments that we got from the chamber that day was, do we need to recognise another white man? You know, that was the commentary that came from the chamber that day, yet we're looking at supporting a motion that does exactly that. So for consistency purposes, it does call into question how people are voting. But in this instance, because the motion is quite convoluted, I won't be supporting it.
Okay, any other discussion? Justice, yep.
I've only
spoken to.
I've only spoken to the amendment, though.
Yes.
Am I able to speak
yes,
to the...
you don't get to close an amendment. So,
We're voting on the amendment, aren't we?
No, we're voting on the whole thing.
Oh, because you...
Yeah, because I accepted it. So I'm sorry, I can't.
I can't speak to the whole motion. I haven't done that. No, I spoke. Sorry, I believe I've only spoken to the amendment.
All right, I'll let you speak.
So I'm
yes,
asking
okay.
to speak to the whole
All right
motion.
then, I'll let you. Yep, okay.
That's why the confusion.
All right.
Yeah, but speak it, mate.
You can speak. Okay, I'll give you. Go on, Councillor Riley.
Yeah, look, I just acknowledging that we're under land. I think my motion is trying to open up that conversation. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. This isn't a political. The previous scenario that's been outlined was about some sort of political honouring of a major political person that came, a prime minister that came from our city. I think that was quite different from this. This is about our own cities, and that is part of our history. But I think there's a way of investigating and looking at that, and this is in ways trying to address some of that, because I think we need to open up the idea of how we look at our story, our various stories, and that's what this is an attempt to do. So I think I'm trying to cover both bases to some degree. I had another point that I wanted to make, which has now escaped me. So, yeah, I mean, this is really important that we need to acknowledge the 65,000 years of history that's gone on before us, and that's what we I would like to see us start to work towards more of that. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Good. I'll just.
Question?
Yes, you may ask a question.
I'd be quite happy to vote on number 3, but not, I have different viewpoints on number 1 and number 2 and number 3.
Right.
So number 1 and 2, I'm totally opposed to. And I sort of feel like the two things don't fit together. I can understand what Councillor Roll is trying to do, and I can understand that and welcome that, but I could support 3, but not 1 and 2.
Okay. I'm not going to prepared to split the amendment only because I think without part of then it doesn't make sense, to be honest. I think it needs to be done on 2 o'clock, but I can understand where you're coming from. As the mover, I'll just quickly close the debate. Just on the in reference to the Bob Hawke thing, I voted for the Bob Hawke mural because I thought that in the same context that I think John Pascoe Faulkner should be recognised. I actually thought Hawke should be recognised too. The only thing I thought maybe you have it as members at wills. As far as men and women from the gold rush, they have been honoured. You know, I know that suburb is called Laylaw by most people, but it's after Peter Lawler, and he has been honoured, and as he should be. He's a hero in my family. My uncle was actually named after him, and he's a hero in my family. Probably the only one from the gold rush that I think doesn't get the recognition that he deserves is Raffaella Carboni. And I think that that's an oversight that should be rectified. And in fact, I've moved a motion in the past to try and do that about 12 years ago. Yes, and I also have no problem at all in recognising important members of the Aboriginal community. I think the fact that we've got the William Barrack Bridge is fantastic. Absolutely. Every time I walk along it on the way to the MCG, I think that that's a really good recognition of Barrack and his contribution. But in saying that, I think that's probably enough. I think we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
Can I have a division?
You can have a division. Okay. All those in favour, could they raise their hand again? Councillors Yildiz, Riley, Martin, Kavanagh, Abood, Dorney, Davidson. And those against? Councillors Tapanos, Farnley, Carly Hannon and Bolton. Thank you, councillors. Move on to notice of motion 4718, which is also mine, a venue for Broadmeadows Rotary Opportunity Shop. I think that's probably going to be less controversial. I think the motion is as written. Have a second to Councillor Davidson. Basically, it's just asking council to liaise with the Broadmeadows Rotary on trying to find them a new home for their opportunity shop because of the, well, hopefully impending level crossing in Glenroy. Although, yes.
Add a potential addition to that. And the reason for asking for this is because last year I did meet with the state member, Lizzie Blanthorne, and that was to look at potential advocacy and working with LXRA. It'd be interesting to know what advocacy and what work she has done to improve the situation for the Rotary Club. I believe that she was on board and quite supportive of the organisation back then, but since then I have heard little and there's been no report back from the state member in relation to that. So it's an amendment. So
that we write to Lizzie and to Ms Blanthorne and ask what action she's taken?
Yes, what action she's taken.
Okay.
Because it's been on the cards for a long time and she did make a commitment to them.
I know that, yeah, okay, thank you. I know that she raised it in Parliament. I noticed in Hampstead that she has raised it in Parliament. But, yeah, the second, I can't remember.
Can we get the words very clear?
Okay.
I'm just waiting to write.
Just want to get exactly the words. Would you like to?
So, works with Broadmeadows Rotary to find a suitable
No, just your point. Writes to Lizzie Blanthorne MP, is it?
Yeah, to write to Lizzie Blanthorne MP and seek an update in relation to her advocacy and possible solutions in relation to the relocation of the Rotary Club.
Okay, thank you very much. That's becomes part of the motion. Any other discussion on this? Being no discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Unanimous? Fine, perfect. Very fast train, it's either Councillor Abood or Councillor Bolton who's moving it.
I'm happy for Councillor Bolton.
Councillor Bolton, and your second, will you?
Yeah. Okay, so this is a motion that was sort of put forward as an amendment at the last council meeting. It's simply that it notes that, the first point notes that the aviation industry is responsible for extremely high level of greenhouse gas emissions and that the expansion of air travel has exacerbated the impact of these high-level emissions, and point 2 advocates the state and federal governments that investment should be focused on the establishment of a very fast train to connect Australia's cities instead of expanding the privately owned airports. And
Thank you, and Councillor Abood will second, I think, so you may speak to it now, Councillor
So
Bolton.
this motion was put forward as an amendment at the last council meeting, but it was recommended to me to move it as a notice of motion for this council meeting. It's in response to council's submission around the plans to expand the Melbourne airport. Now, airports all over Australia have been privatised, and basically private businesses that are trying to expand their business. And really, since this whole privatisation occurred and airports have been expanding, really all discussion about very fast train has vanished from the agenda. And this is the one area of the economy where there has been no plan really to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So various other areas of the economy, we can be critical of how little they've done, etc., in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But, greenhouse gas emissions are expanding out of sight in this area, with airlines competing to try and get more people to go by plane rather than other means of transport. In the past, in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of discussion about a very fast train, but that has entirely vanished from the agenda. And I think in Australia, if we are to reach our targets, minimal as they are, we need to redirect our resources away from expanding airports to creating very fast trains to link our cities. So I think this is an important policy position for Moreland Council, and it fits in with all sorts of other policies we've got. Once upon a time, most people couldn't afford to fly. Now with cut price airlines as a result of cutting workers' wages and conditions, a lot more people are flying, but we don't have the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abood.
Thank you. This is slightly different for me. The airport, the submission that Moreland City Council was making to the airport master plan, which came to the last meeting, is very different for me in terms of that letter goes to a different destination to this letter. I don't know, if you haven't noticed how hopeless I am at doing stuff at 7:30 at night in terms of amendments, you're just not watching me go red and every other thing that happens. So I rejected this amendment in the 11th hour because I couldn't process what was going on so late in the day and had no lead up. But I absolutely have no reason whatsoever not to support this. I've actually already been involved in quite a bit of work along these lines, including going to several meetings with Craig Griffiths over at Moonee Valley Council to talk about a very fast train, and where we had some very involved meetings about where the train would go, what it would look like, who's been lobbying for it. I suspect that some of that work is where some of the loose promises that have been made about the airport rail have come out from as a result of that. But I never had any inclination not to support this letter, but I just needed it to be broken up because it's actually going to a completely different place. And I think that it will probably be supported unanimously because I think all of us at the table understand the impact of increased air travel, which was addressed in the last at the motion that actually applied to that, but also that trains are something that infrastructure should have been built decades ago. We should have a very fast train to Sydney and to Adelaide now. It should be another way to get somewhere in 3 or 4 hours rather than getting on a plane for 90 minutes. And I think there's no denying that this is something that the council and also the broader community would support 100%.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Rowley.
Point of order, there's no speaker against.
No, hang on.
Sorry, I'm just wanting to propose an amendment which might be acceptable
Your turn.
to the
Yep, that's fine. Yep, go on.
mover and seconder, which is just to put after notes, comma, council's recent adoption of the climate emergency framework. I just think it'd be nice to have that in there because I think it would strengthen it a bit, given, and it's also about a communication issue. Sorry.
Okay. I assume that's acceptable to the
Yeah,
mover and
totally.
seconder, so that becomes part of the standard motion. Any speaker against the item?
Comma, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So there's no speakers against, so we're going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. We now have notice of motion 4918, the New Joneses pop-up lifestyle activation in Moreland, and that's from Councillor Dorney. Is it as printed in the agenda, Councillor Dorney, your motion?
Is.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Riley. You may speak to it now, Councillor Dorney.
Thank you. So just to give a little context for those who maybe haven't read the report, the New Joneses is a mobile tiny house that has been travelling around the state since 2012, sharing a message, big life, little impact. And they go around, people come to visit, varying from school groups to being set up in high-profile public places such as Sustainability Fest, where people can visit and look, touch and feel what sustainable lifestyles feel like, look like, and can be like. I think that it's something which is a great opportunity, and I was approached by the founder and current director of the New Joneses with an opportunity for Moreland, being that when one of their new tiny houses, which is currently being built now, is not touring for 2019, it's going to be stored at a site in Brunswick. And so Tamara from the New Joneses approached myself to see if we could start some conversations with council about possible partnership opportunities, particularly on the back of climate emergency and looking at the principles that the New Joneses, the messages that they share. There's 10 or 12 key principles around sustainable lifestyles. They align really well to some of the key messages we're getting out in our policies, particularly the zero carbon evolution strategy, and potentially some of the behaviour change we're trying to drive as that action plan is developed moving forward. So this motion is purely, it could be, it could be lots of things. There's potential to activate the actual space where the site is. There's potential for the tiny home to tour around Moreland, or even, just school groups touring, visiting the site and understanding, learning about composting and various aspects of living a lighter footprint. So I just wanted to progress council to actually start those conversations and look into the feasibility of establishing this partnership and bringing back a report as to what that could look like for council to consider.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Riley?
Just very briefly, anything that's going to assist us and our communities to live lighter and express a lighter ecological footprint, I think is worth investigating. I understand officers are aware that we are almost at capacity where we're going with our zero carbon evolution plans, but given the climate emergency and the framework that we've adopted recently, I think this is another, if we can evaluate to that and the investigation comes back supporting that with little cost to officers' time, I know they are stretched. I think it'd be worth hearing that report and getting a way forward. If we can use it, it'd be great to see how we can use it to Moreland's advantage. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no speaker against, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, that concludes the notice of motion. There are no notices of rescission, so I'll move to foreshadowed items. Councillors, are there any items that you'd like to foreshadow? I know I haven't forgot about urgent. Any items that you'd like to foreshadow for the next council meeting? Yes?
So the next meeting that we're going to have is on the 29th of October, and that's the ceremonial meeting. And I didn't know when a good opportunity would be to slot this in, and thank you, Councillor Rood, for slotting this in previously, but I would like to congratulate and thank our Mayor, Councillor Kavanagh, for his leadership during this year and throughout the years he has been on council. His advocacy, his integrity, and his wit and humour, which has left us all in stitches on numerous occasions. I think whatever achievement he has accomplished, whether it was great or small, he's done it with such integrity and passion and a genuine love for our community. And some of the highlights, I think, for this year would be the continued campaign and his strong advocacy against the harm that poker machines do in our community. He's been a huge driving force behind the Oak Park pool, and I'm so pleased that it's really taking shape and it's going to form part of his year this year as mayor. And his commitment to Glenroy throughout the years, particularly the Give Glenroy a Go campaign, which was really championed by our Mayor, Councillor Kavanagh. I'd like to thank him for his positive leadership and his strong contribution to the Moreland community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much indeed. Very, very kind. Thank you very much. Are there actually any foreshadowed items?
I think Councillor Davison raises a very good point. Thank you to the man. In that light, I'd like to recognise Councillor Yildiz, as this could be his last council meeting as well. So he's had a fantastic contribution in the last 12 months, and a lot of advocacy work has meant that Moreland has been able to get a lot of initiatives brought forward along with Councillor Kavanagh's advocacy work, of course. So I'd like to thank both gentlemen for their contributions and wish them the best over the next few months.
Thank you very much.
About Sue.
Yeah, and
Councillor Bolton.
yeah, thank you. Well done.
In thanking Councillor Yildiz, I'd also like to thank all of the councillors who have also contributed immensely.
Leave it.
No worries, we're with the program. Okay. Are there actually any foreshadowed items? There are none. Okay, we'll move on to the next. Now, Councillor Bolton, I believe you have an item that you're considering as urgent business. Can I ask you just to outline the item briefly and why you think we should submit it to the agenda?
Yes. Well, the motion is that council ceases work on the upfill bike path between Albert Street and Phoenix Street in order to urgently consult Moreland Bicycle Users Group and the lead petitioner, John Englert, regarding an appropriate and safe detour while the improvement works are being carried out. The reason this is an urgent business item, I was only contacted today. The works began today, and I think a number of cyclists were quite shocked today about the detour they were being taken on, which goes down Albert Street to Sydney Road, along the Sydney Road footpath, and then back across to Phoenix Street, where there's no actual proper crossing. And there will be, during this period of these works, a Ride to Work Day on 17th of October.
Okay, I think we're getting a bit of detail now. I'll just now. So you're moving, obviously, to be accepted into the agenda first of all. Do I have
debated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I have a seconder to see the thing that all supports adding this item to as an urgent business item to the agenda? Councillor Abood. So we have a mover and seconder. So what we'll do is we'll put the vote. Now, this vote is not for the actual item. It's whether to be admitted into the agenda and to be considered. All right? Everyone clear? All right, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Okay. Declare that carried. So it's in the agenda now. And so we might put that on the screen. Okay. So it's been accepted as an urgent business item. And so the motion is that correct, what's written up there, Councillor Bolton?
Yep.
And you'd like to move that now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Councillor Bolton is moving the item that is on our screen. And does Councillor Bolton have a seconder to that item?
Anyone want to second the item, the motion?
Okay, just to be clear, all we've done at this point is accept the item onto the agenda. And now we have Councillor Bolton moving what is on the screen. And before we can debate it at all or move to it, we will need a seconder, otherwise it will lapse. Okay, Councillor Farnley is seconding. Thank you.
I understand council officers have looked at various alternatives as a temporary path. but a number of cyclists who have been involved in a lot of cycling advocacy in our city, as well as cyclists who are just going about their business and got a shock today when they discovered the temporary route that had been decided on by council. Have a lot of concerns about the safety of this. Now, obviously, we want these improvement works to be done, but I think the concerns that have been raised by cyclists who began a petition this afternoon immediately after discovering this and got quite a few signatures, given it was only started a few hours before the council meeting. I think it's important that council has some discussion with the key cyclist group in our municipality and John Englert, the lead petitioner, urgently to see if an alternative that is suitable can be worked out. If there's absolutely no alternative, then obviously the work will have to go ahead. But I think we do need to have that discussion with the key cycling advocates in the Moreland area as fast as and urgently as possible to see if there is an alternative that will be safe. It would be really terrible if we had some sort of tragedy with this particular route that's been chosen. We need that conversation to happen urgently.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Farnley, as a seconder, do you want to speak to it?
No.
No. Any speakers against the motion?
I just want to make a comment more than speak against, but I just don't, I'm speaking against them. I just don't understand why a motion comes to the chamber, why this is required. Surely officers and Bug and the cycling community can meet and determine what are the solutions. There won't be many, there'll probably be 2 or 3 paths maximum. Why do we need to stop the project? I don't know whether it's in-house staff or contractors. That costs money, costs time. I'm sure, but this work is already done and there probably isn't a better solution. But if anyone has one, raise it tomorrow. Raise it tonight with Grant. But don't stop the project. Let's keep going. We need to widen the bike path. We need to make improvements. We need extra lighting. Why stop such a critical bicycle infrastructure project when you could just talk to officers and see what the alternatives are anyway?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any speakers in favour of the motion?
Can I get some advice from the CEO in regards to what options we have if it is
If the CEO
not
will provide that.
ceased, what options we have in terms of keeping some momentum going but creating some safety?
So just through the Mayor, there was a little bit of advice provided, but it was, not long ago, so you may not have gotten across it in the inboxes, but there has been assessment of a range of options by officers. It's been done in a really genuine way because nobody wants anybody to be unsafe. There's a number of alternatives that are not actually really able for us to be to advertise them as approved detours. For example, I hear that there was some discussion about detouring through the Woolies sort of car park. We don't have permission to do that, so we can't advertise that as an approved detour. So there's a range of issues that mean that the alternatives are not, in our view, viable, and that this is the advertised detour. And it's not what everyone has to go down. Everyone can choose how they actually do this. You are not limited to only doing it this way. However, it's advice that we've provided to people while it's closed. Now, we can, if there is some idea that we haven't considered, of course we'll have a look at it. It can happen in parallel with the project continuing in the next couple of days if there are some other views, or if you choose this amendment, if you choose to stop the project, you can also stop the project.
How long would the project take to be completed?
We finish around the 3rd of November is mine. Yeah, 3rd of November, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. We've had that. Are you speaking in favour or against?
I just want to foreshadow a motion if this is lost, though,
Right.
Based on the advice that I've just received, that given what the CEO has said about other solutions, that my suggestion is that foreshadowed solution would be that we refer this item to the CEO for an urgent and important review to consider any other solutions that haven't been already considered, but otherwise that the works continue because of the cost factors and other things, and I understand the inconvenience, but really if anything should happen, that it's very difficult for us tonight to go through all of the details and to consider all of the arguments and the pros and cons, and I think that if there is some sort of review, that it should be the CEO who conducts that in that role, and it seems like they've already done a fairly thorough assessment of that, so I'm just foreshadowing that
Yes.
if this is that.
Delay
Okay,
it
so
and have it closed in December. Doesn't sound like a better solution.
I beg your pardon?
No, sorry, I said if we delay it and we have to close it in December, that would be far worse.
Okay, all right, sorry, yeah. All right, anyone else on Councillor Bolton's motion? Yes,
I just wanted to ask a question.
you can.
I was wondering what level of notification there is, and whether that can be, we can
Councillors, sorry, we're still in debate, councillors.
up the ante on the information on the site in terms of letting the pedestrians know what's going on, letting the cyclists know, because people seriously commute down that way, and we know that. Know how long the thing is happening for. There's, other parts of the path have been closed for a long period of time, which is a great inconvenience. So maybe I'm interested to know whether there is much notification around the site, and whether we could ramp that up if we do have to.
Yep. Just through the Mayor, I know that there has been some notification. I saw some on social media. I saw a range of things. I can't give you detail because I can't remember it all off the top of my head. I think, like anything, there's always an opportunity to ramp that up. So, if we were coming away from tonight one way or the other, we would consider that anyway. I think that's a reasonable request.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? You have had a speaker again, so you can close the debate on this.
I'd like to maybe make an extra point just in closing. I understand that there hasn't been really much allowance or for people with children's trailers or cargo bikes. It's particularly difficult for those people. I'm reluctant. I can understand councillors being reluctant to stop a project, but I think it is important for our major cycling group in Moreland to have some input. I'm not talking about unlimited. I think hopefully maybe some sort of discussion could happen tomorrow, hopefully, with some representatives in Moorbug and John Englard to consider if there is another option that hasn't been considered by council yet. I just think I feel, this is an important area for us in Moreland, the whole issue of cycling. I know council staff do not want, are considerate of the safety of all members of the community, including cyclists, but I just feel that our leading bicycle advocates, if they've got major concerns, that gives me a major concern, and I think we need some sort of meeting with them urgently to see if there is another more suitable alternative. I just feel that we sort of owe it to our cycling community, which is many and varied.
Thank you, councillor.
Can I ask a question?
No,
If there is a commitment to have that meeting, can this motion be withdrawn?
Let's just vote.
No, we're going to vote on the motion. Yeah, we're going to vote. She's closed. Councillor Bolton had the right to close the debate. She's done that. So I'm going to put the Councillor Bolton's motion to vote. All those in favour? Those against? It's not a good idea to second the motion, then not vote in favour of it.
Well, it's at least facilitated the foreshadowed motion.
Yeah, all right, okay. All right, okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Rowley, would you like to?
Yeah, I'd just like to put the foreshadowed motion that this matter be referred to the CEO for urgent consideration of any additional solutions or information that may have arisen since the officers have considered the closure and the detour that's been put in place.
Okay, we'll just wait till that gets written on the board and so we're clear on what we're voting on. Do you like to?
regarding the detail of.
So about through the mayor.
Yes.
So the information that's arisen since,
Yes.
some new
So
information.
this matter is urgently referred to the Chief Executive Officer for consideration of any other solutions or considerations since officers made their decision to implement the detour.
And the meeting with bugs.
Just wait a second, we'll just get on the board. Okay, do we have a second to Councillor Riley's motion?
Suggest we probably need to include the information about the uphill bike path between Albert Street and Phoenix Street in the motion, because otherwise people looking at the motion who haven't witnessed this debate won't know what it's referring to. Just some location information.
Okay, so that
I'll
motion's,
need to second if
yeah, that
no one
motion's
else
moved
is
by
second.
Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Bolton. I think we're clear. I don't think we need any further discussion, and I think we're clear, so I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Could I have a motion now to close the council meeting for
Sorry,
public?
Mayor. Can we just revisit the governance report one more time?
Right,
Sorry.
yes, okay, I'm happy to do so.
Which is...
Just before we do so, yeah. Yeah, so you're worried about the point 2, yes?
Yes, so it's actually a correction that I had a leave of absence for the briefing on the 27th of August.
It should be 27th rather than 20th? Okay. How should I deal with that? Yeah. Does anyone have any objection to that being amended on the... Okay, so we're just going to take that as read, basically. All right, thank you. Could I have a motion to close the council meeting to public in accordance with section 89.2, moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Davidson. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Thank you. I now declare the council meeting closed to the public. I'd like to thank the gallery attendees and thank those watching on live streaming for your interest in council matters, and wish you a good night. And declare that